Most Bulls fans, not all, but most realistic Bulls fans anyway, would agree that despite all of the moves that were made by the Bulls this offseason, improving the roster, that this squad still isn't a title contending team. I think they certainly are a playoff team and will make some noise this season, no question, but the way the roster currently stands, they are not a championship contending team. I know some Bulls fans would disagree with that statement simply because of the level of talent the Bulls now have, but the fact of the matter is, even with all of this talent, there are still some holes within the roster that would prevent them from, say, winning a title, especially when you compare them to some of the top teams in the league that they would be going up against. Not only that, but it's literally going to be the first season of a completely overhauled roster playing together, and that takes time to develop chemistry and build cohesion as a team. But what would make the Bulls title contenders by just making one move? And that's what I want to talk about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. It's crazy that we are just 1 month away from today from seeing the Bulls' first regular season game on October 20th against the Pistons. And we're actually just 1 week from today away from the start of training camp. I was actually messaging with our Bulls beat writer Casey Johnson, and evidently training camp is actually starting a day earlier on the 27th. I'm actually going to be doing another interview with Casey leading up to training camp, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, with this season being a month away, training camp being a week away, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'll be covering the Bulls all season with live stream chats for every game, post-game videos, hopefully more interviews with Bulls insiders, maybe even players. And since 65% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing so you don't miss a video. But with that being said, let's get back into the topic. Now, I've gotten this question from a few of you, either in the comments or in DMs, and it's an interesting question because you can speculate the multitude of ways for what would make the Bulls contenders, true contenders. And of course, you could give the lazy answer and say, well, just get Giannis or Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard. That would make them contenders. And yes, it would make them contenders, but let's try and at least be somewhat realistic in a move that could be made to make the Bulls title contenders this season. And I think first and foremost, it's probably important to define what is considered to be a title contender, because I'm sure there are many different viewpoints on what constitutes a true title contender. But for the purposes of this video and how I would define it, a title contender is a team that most people would expect them to at least make a conference finals, a team where it wouldn't be a surprise or a Cinderella story if they won the championship, a team that has the top 5 highest odds of winning the title according to Vegas odds, and a team that if they were to, say, get bounced in the first or in the second round of the playoffs, that it would be a big disappointment and a failed season for the team. Basically, a title contending team is a team that has a legit shot at actually winning a championship. And the Bulls, as of right now, I don't believe have a legitimate shot at winning a championship, which there isn't anything wrong with that. A good 80% of the league don't have a legit shot at winning the title. And for the Bulls, just to even have it be a question of whether or not they're actually a title team is such a massive leap forward from where we have been over the past 5 years. That, as Bulls fans, I will take it. All that being said, though, I've been asked if the Bulls are potentially one piece away from being a contending team, even if it means for this season, not even next season, but making them a title contending team this season, what would it be? And I have to say, it would be very hard for the Bulls to pull off a move that would in fact make them contenders. And really just because free agency is all but over and dried up with only a few players remaining, the Bulls have limited cap space as it is with all the moves that they have made. And yes, trades can be made, but for the Bulls, they don't have that many options in terms of trade chips to get a piece that puts them over the top. Unless they want to trade their core 4, which would include players that they just brought in, so the options are rather limited. But as I thought about it more and more, there is one move that I do think could potentially make the Bulls title contenders if they were able to pull it off. And what I want to know is what you guys think of it. Now, in my last video, I was talking about Coby White's future with the Chicago Bulls and how really his fit with this roster going forward is a bit uncertain, and the fact that the Bulls brought in Lonzo Ball and have chosen to prioritize him as the Bulls' future point guard. They added Caruso to the second unit, and of course they also drafted Ayo. So there is going to be competition for minutes in the backcourt, even for minutes off the bench. Now, in that video, as well as a prior video on my Bulls bold predictions, I talked about how I do think the Bulls will ultimately trade Coby by the trade deadline for this upcoming season. Not saying that I want it to happen, but I think it's the most likely scenario. Now, if you look at the Bulls roster, and not even just their roster, but also their draft capital as a whole, Coby White is probably their best trade asset that would get them the biggest return. He's young, a former lottery pick, has shown upside potential in improving from his rookie to sophomore season. He has his flaws, but also is a very hard worker and has a strong desire to get better and compete at the highest level. He would be ideal for most teams that are either rebuilding or in need of some offense. They also have a guy like Troy Brown Jr., who, for the record, I do not want to trade because I think he also has a lot of upside potential, and I love his hustle on the defensive end, especially when he guards strong wing scorers, as we saw him do in the limited minutes with the Bulls after the trade deadline. But if we're really trying to find a piece that would make the Bulls contenders, then you have to consider all options and trade assets that are valuable, and because Troy Brown Jr. is young, a good defender, he's likely the Bulls' next most valuable trade piece. Again, aside from the starting lineup, but we're not looking at those guys. Then we can't forget that the Bulls do in fact have a first-round pick that they can actually trade. It's the pick that they just acquired in the Lauri Markkanen deal from Portland, which is lottery protected. The Bulls cannot trade their own first-round pick for this upcoming draft because of the Stepien rule, which doesn't allow for teams to trade consecutive first-round draft picks. And since the Bulls already traded their first-round draft pick from this past season and in 2023 in the Vucevic trade, so they are not able to ship that pick. And since the Bulls cannot trade that pick, and they also have another first round pick, again, in the event that Portland's pick doesn't become a lottery pick, do they really need 2 first round draft picks for this upcoming draft, especially if they are in win now mode and looking for a piece to make them title contenders? Now, a quick disclaimer, yes, I get that holding onto that pick in the event they have to forfeit it in the ongoing Lonzo Ball investigation, which at the time of this recording is still ongoing, but for the purposes of this video, let's just say that that isn't a factor for consideration, and the Bulls were not found guilty of any sort of tampering. Now, aside from these 3 pieces, Coby White, Troy Brown Jr., and a first-round pick, you do have other potential pieces, although I think it's unlikely the Bulls would trade them, but Javonte Green or even Derrick Jones Jr. in the event they needed to add sweeteners. So, all of those trade chips in mind. And it's funny because initially when I was talking about all of this, I thought, you know, Ben Simmons added to this roster would make the Bulls title contenders, especially if you had him running the 4 as a point forward. But I know you guys would probably eat me alive in the comments and be like, really, dude, you're still on the Ben Simmons train. But no, not only is Ben Simmons unrealistic, I think he actually wouldn't fit with this roster anymore now that we've added Lonzo and DeMar. I was high on making a push for Simmons before those free agency moves were made, but at this point, the ship has sailed on Ben Simmons, and honestly, it's probably for the best. But anyway, the move that I think would make the Bulls title contenders, and again, a realistic move, or at least somewhat realistic, because to be honest, I don't even think this would happen, but that's for the Bulls to trade Coby White and that lottery-protected first-round pick from Portland for Jonas Valanciunas. I know, you guys are probably like, dude, after all of this, this is what you came up with, Valanciunas? And look, I wanted to do guys like Zion Williamson or even Domantas Sabonis or Karl Anthony Towns. Even Pascal Siakam was likely out of the question because realistically speaking, trading Coby, a lottery-protected first, and even throwing in guys like Troy Brown Jr., Javonte Green, Derrick Jones Jr., heck, even some additional draft capital wouldn't have been enough to get someone like Zion Williamson or some of the players I mentioned. Maybe Siakam, that would have been more realistic. And if you haven't noticed, I've mainly prioritized big man because it's really the only area where the Bulls are lacking since we're really guard heavy at this point, which is why I've included the guys that I mentioned for the Bulls in these trade packages. But listen, hear me out on Valanciunas. Valanciunas is slowly starting to become one of the more underrated big men in the league. He was a high draft pick, and so I think most people just assume, well, he never really lived up to the number 5 pick in the 2011 draft. A good player, but not a star-level player. Well, Valanciunas had the best season of his career last year, and did it while being a key piece on a playoff team with the Memphis Grizzlies. He averaged 17.1 points per game. He finished 3rd in the league in rebounding, averaging 12.5 rebounds per game, 3rd in the entire league. He was the most efficient he's ever been, going near 60% from the field, which he finished 11th in the league, and with a PER of 24.4, also one of the highest in the league and the highest of his career. I know he's not the best on defense, and if you're the Bulls, you kind of have to be looking at defensive bigs when you're running with Vucevic at the 5, but overall, Valanciunas is a very, very underrated big man who, like Vucevic, would be a double-double machine, and the Bulls would be absolutely incredible on the boards. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, would this even work? Because Valanciunas is a center. He's not going to start over Vucevic, and if you're thinking of playing him at the 4, you're slowing down the growth of Patrick Williams by not letting him start. Well, from my perspective, why can't you still have both Valanciunas and Patrick Williams get enough minutes to where Valanciunas would still accept his role even if it potentially meant coming off the bench? and you give Williams enough minutes to where he's still getting the development he needs, but also having your established big man veteran that propels you even further with your win now mindset that the team has gone in on. Not only that, but Valanciunas is on an expiring contract, so if the experiment doesn't work out, you don't have to re-sign him or even do a sign-and trade for that matter. Or he works out perfectly to give the Bulls the needed front court depth, and now you have his bird rights to be able to retain him in free agency to be able to operate over the cap. And because Valanciunas' contract is expiring, it makes it much more tradable to where trading something like Coby White and a lottery protected first would get it done without having to even include Troy Brown Jr. or any other assets. And if you have to think with the direction that the Pelicans are going in and wanting to get younger and wanting to build around Zion, and the fact that, one, they already have Zion and another center in Jackson Hayes who is much younger, that getting a guard, which the Pelicans need a shooting guard, a young guard in Coby White to pair in the backcourt with Devontae Graham, and not only that, but it gives the Pelicans a lottery protected first to add more draft capital to their bucket. For the Pelicans, they have to look at anything and everything they can to make Zion happy and ensure that he stays in New Orleans long term after his rookie contract is up. And I'm not saying that Coby in a first solves that, but you have to think that Valanciunas likely isn't a part of their long-term plans, especially since they mainly executed that trade for Valanciunas to free up cap space, which was thought to go all in on Kyle Lowry or even matching an offer to Lonzo Ball, which of course they botched. So it's not like they were trading for Jonas because they really wanted him. It was more to get out of Steven Adams' contract, which Adams never really made sense for the Pelicans anyway. So the point in all of this is it's doable, a doable trade, and I know some Bulls fans out there would say this is a trash trade and that's way too much for Valanciunas. Well, if you look at what the Bulls really need in terms of their front court depth, an incredible season from Valanciunas and what he did last year, this isn't too much to give up for someone like him. I think people also forget that the first round pick is lottery protected, so the absolute best that that pick will convey to is the 15th overall pick. Like if this was an unprotected first round pick that could potentially turn into a top 5 pick, then no, this trade isn't worth it at all, because that would be much more valuable than just having a lottery protected pick. Now again, I know to most Valanciunas doesn't move the needle for the Bulls in making them title contenders, but if we're trying to be realistic with the options that we have available and not trading any of our starting 5, which that's a big caveat because it would completely change things if you added packages that included part of our starting 5. But Valanciunas is one of the best options that would be out there for the trade chips that we have. Siakam is also a possibility, but I feel like his value is a little too high than what the Bulls can afford. He's also on a big contract as well, which again, the Bulls can't afford. Now, if we scratch that and started including the Bulls starting 5, I mean, if you could somehow swing a deal that included Coby White, Troy Brown Jr., the first round pick from Portland, Derrick Jones Jr., and Patrick Williams for Zion Williamson, that right there is a title contending team. But to be honest, I don't even think that haul would be enough for the Pelicans to move on from Zion, even if they do fear that he might not stay, because Zion is a generational talent, and they already lost one generational talent in Anthony Davis. They don't want to botch this one as well, although I get a strong feeling that they eventually will. Even if the Bulls threw in some additional second round picks or even a first round pick in 2027, which is the next pick that they would have available to trade, it's still likely not going to be getting them Zion. Giving up Patrick Williams would also be a little hard to swallow, but man, a starting lineup of Lonzo, Lavine, DeRozan, Zion, and Vucevic, ooh, that would be one of the most exciting teams in the league to watch, and they would be absolutely a title contending team. But anyway, let's bring ourselves back down to reality. I want to know what you guys think. If there was one move the Bulls could make, just one, and it didn't mean compromising their starting 5, and the one move could make them title contenders, what would it be? Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.